This happened years ago, but the thought of it still keeps me up at night. I was walking through the hills of a provincial park with my dog during winter, so the sun set much faster than I expected and before I could get back to my car. Once the sun was gone and all you could see was darkness, I was slowly walking through a field when out of nowhere I had, to this day, the most gut-wrenching, undeniable feeling I was being watched. I turned around, and in the distance I saw a figure standing there, darker than the night sky around us. The instant I saw him, my stomach dropped and my body literally froze. I knew in that moment, somehow, he was coming for me. I grabbed my dog's leash and we book it. I mean sprinting, full speed, up and down hills, around trees, down embankments. I was running so fast as if my life was dependent on it, and to this day, I'm sure it was. I make the 30 to 45 minute trip in 10, and all that stands before me and my car is this switchback you have to go back and forth up if you want to reach the top. So once again, I am giving it all I got, running up this switchback as fast as I possibly can, and once I reach the top and look back down, who else but this person chasing me? And does he go up the switchback like any sane person would? Of course not. He starts sprinting right up the middle of this dog switchback, heading straight for me. I scream at him, "F off!" And he doesn't say anything, not a single word, just continues running right at me. I am so lucky my car was at the top of that hill, because as I ran toward it, just like in the horror movies, I dropped my keys and was fiddling with them to try to open the door. Just in time, I got the door open, threw my dog in, and shut the door behind me just as this guy reaches us. Best part is, there were no other vehicles parked anywhere around us, but where did this person park? Yeah, right next to me, of all places. Now, this guy literally jumps into his truck so fast, and to this day, I have never seen a better example of speeds out of there like a bat out of hell. He gunned the engine so hard, black smoke blasted out the back as he swerved out of there, leaving skid marks behind him. I sat in the back of my vehicle for hours afterwards, shaking and crying, knowing I was this close to whatever he had planned for me. And that's why I'm sharing this story, in hopes that people won't ignore that gut feeling, the little voice in the back of your head that tells you to run. If I did that day, I never would have noticed him in time. I would not have had the head start I needed to escape. Always trust your gut feelings and intuition. It might really be the deciding factor in if this is your final day on Earth or not. So, I'm of the mindset that everyone should know a little bit about cars. I've always been mechanically inclined, and I think that may have saved me. I was using dating apps a few years ago. Met this guy, he seemed super nice. We talked for a few weeks before I was willing to meet with him. His dad owned a local gun store where I would go get my target stuff. I used to be in a women's league for competition shooting. So I had seen this guy around and had a decent impression of him, but wanted to be safe. He invited me to a concert at a local town site. It was a concert I really wanted to go to, and I figured it would be safe since it was a well-known place with a lot of security. I let him pick me up because he had talked about mechanics and cars and he wanted to show me his Mustang. He bragged about how well he kept it running and how he babied it. I was into time trial racing at the time, so I was interested to see what he had done. He picked me up and we started heading to the event. Right before the exit, he said his car was acting funny. I was watching the dash, and if you've been in any racing, you know our cars and trucks usually have accessories. Whether it's aftermarket racks and gauges or switches, there's usually something aftermarket inside the car. There was nothing extra. The car felt like it was shifting correctly. There was no shudder or noise, nothing to indicate any problems. I was like, that's weird, and all I said was we should try and limp it to the concert venue. It's less than a mile away, and it's better than being stuck on the I-15. He agrees and drives us very carefully the last mile. We get to the concert and things were okay-ish. He kept watching me and buying me drinks. I refused to drink, so every time he gave me one, I would make up an excuse and go to the bathroom to flush it. He kept making comments about how well I was handling my alcohol. I was super uncomfortable. The concert ended and it was time to leave. For context, this concert happened at the local reservation town site, and at the time, the res did not have great cell service, so I couldn't get a hold of anyone to come get me. I decided to bite the bullet, and I talked him into taking the old highway instead of the I-15. It sounds silly, but when you take the old highway, even though it's slower, people are more willing to stop and help you if you are on the freeway. I figured if he was having car troubles, it would be safer, and we wouldn't have people flying by us at 80 miles an hour. We made it halfway between the town site and our town, and he says the car is acting funny again, and pulls over. I was stone cold sober and didn't notice anything wrong, so I got out of the car to check it out with him. He started making comments about how I was drunk and I should wait in the car, and that it's safer because you can't trust drunk Indians, especially with a little girl like you. This dude had no idea that I'm actually native, and I just had albinism. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up, so I checked my phone. I just barely had any service and started texting my dad. As I walked away from the engine compartment, I noticed he was watching me, so I started acting like I was trying to get cell service to get help. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched this man take the spark plug wires off the distributor cap and switch the order. Your spark plug wires connect to the distributor cap based on the order your cylinders fire in, so doing that will either make the car run terrible or not even turn on. I managed to send my dad a picture of what he was doing, and my dad tells me to start walking. As I went to walk away, this guy got back in the car and opened his glove box, which exposed a pistol he had. He told me not to worry and we would be safe. I probably broke a world record for how fast I was texting my dad. He said to start walking and to tell the guy he was on his way and that our friends live up the road. So I did. I started walking with a purpose and took off as quick as I could. The guy was yelling after me, and I yelled back, "The wind is too loud and I can't hear you. I'll be back with my friends." I was scared out of my mind. We were 10 miles out of town with no one around. The closest road actually led to a cemetery, so there was really no one there to help me. I got this really bad feeling the farther I got from the car, so I turned around and looked. The hood was closed and his lights were on, so I decided to hide in the farm irrigation next to the road. I kept walking towards town and texted my dad what was happening. I heard a car slowly coming up behind me and saw a flashlight, so I pressed against the side of the ditch and waited for it to pass. Once I couldn't hear it anymore, I crawled out and just kind of kept walking along the weeds. My dad texted me that he saw me, so when he pulled up, I ran to the truck. As we made it toward the town, we passed the dude, and he had like 3 cop cars around him. My dad told me not to worry about what happened. I heard through the grapevine later on that he had been charged with violent crimes in the past, that he had been arrested that night for concealed carry without a permit. The police never talked to me, but I haven't seen that guy in town since. If I didn't have experience with cars, and I didn't know what he was doing, I could have been dead in that ditch instead of hiding. Most communities have a place where you can take basic car care and maintenance courses. I highly recommend everyone take them and at least know the basics. This dude knew I knew cars, but his whole goal was to get me so sick drunk I wouldn't realize what was happening. So, let's not meet again, fake car troubles guy. Many years ago, before kids, rescue animals, a mortgage, and a husband, I was a travel writer in Europe. I did most of my trips alone. This story is about the first time I visited Prague. I'd never been to Prague and the trip was last minute, so I had little time to prepare. My travel partner had dumped me in another country and I was determined to make the best out of the trip by visiting a place I had never been. Upon arrival at the train station, I visited the accommodation office and asked for a hostel not far from the center. In my early 20s, winging it was part of the fun. These days, I'm far less adventurous. The hostel they sent me to was a sprawling, crumbling, slate gray Art Deco building on a nondescript street about a 10-minute walk to Stare Mesto. The inside was probably beautiful at one time, but by the time I checked in, it was full of shabby, mismatched furniture and cheap stained carpet. Most of the light fixtures were broken, leaving everything but the lobby dark and gloomy. It smelled of standing water and dust. I found my room, a double for $12 per night, and made note of the fact that I had a roommate. She wasn't there, but on her side of the room there was a suitcase, dress neatly folded across the back of a plastic chair, a scattering of makeup containers on the beat-up desk, and a stack of German fashion magazines on the bed. As I had no plans or goals on this impromptu trip, I spent the afternoon exploring Old Town Square, the Jewish Quarter, and Wenceslas Square. I purchased some Czech crystal for my mom and painted eggs from a street vendor for myself. I also made reservations for a sunset dinner cruise for one. At around 6 p.m., I returned to my room to shower, change clothes, and unload my purchases. When I left my room about an hour later, there was no indication that my roommate had returned at any point during the day. After the cruise, I stopped at a tiny bar on Tinska and had a glass of wine. I heard horror stories about the dangers of Prague, but I felt no more trepidation than I did at any other large city. Sure, the cobblestone streets, fog rolling off the Vltava, backlit Gothic architecture, and winding alleys made me think of Jack the Ripper and Dracula, but in a good way. It was nearly midnight when I returned to my hostel, so I was surprised to find that my roommate still hadn't returned. That wasn't uncommon, though. Backpackers are a fickle lot. She could have gone on a short overnight trip and just left her stuff behind, hooked up with a guy or girl, and was holed up at their place, or hanging out at another hostel. So I was surprised, but not concerned. I took another shower before bed, however, and was surprised to find that the things in the room had changed upon my return. Her bed was neatly turned down, the magazines had moved to the nightstand, and the dress was gone. The strangest thing, though, was the addition of a pink, silky nightgown spread across the bed. My bed. Maybe she thought she still had the room to herself? I didn't see how. My shopping bags, clothes, and toiletries were in plain view. I gently moved the nightgown over to her bed and then settled in for the night as I wrote in my journal. I assumed she was in the shower or somewhere nearby, so I expected her to return shortly. After about an hour, though, her side was still empty. I needed to use the restroom before I went to sleep, so I made one last trip down the hall. The building was unusually quiet. There weren't the regular sounds of chatty backpackers, the clinking of glasses, or music that would normally leak through the walls. There was nothing. It was hushed, like a church after the congregation has left. I found myself practically tiptoeing back. My room was near the end of the hall, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the corridor was darker than before. The few working lights were blinking as they struggled to stay lit, and it reminded me of a fun house. A tightness began to fill my stomach, and I subconsciously quickened my steps. There wasn't a soul behind me, yet I kept glancing back over my shoulder, convinced I'd see someone gaining momentum on me. The only sound was the soft thud of my flip-flops as they struck my soles. I was flooded with relief as I flung open my door, but it didn't last long. Everything was exactly as I left it, except for the silky nightgown, which was now back on my bed. Sleep came in fits and starts. I left the lamp on for a while, still convinced my roommate would be right back, but the shadows it cast made the room even spookier. It was too dark with the light off. I'd finally slipped into a deep sleep when I suddenly heard the door open. A man stood in the darkened doorway, the hall light behind him showing just enough for me to see his contorted face.
"I didn't mean to," he sobbed. "You have to help me."
Too confused and disoriented to be scared, I sat up, scrubbed at my eyes, and reached for the lamp switch, but once the room was light, I saw that the door was closed. There was no man. I quickly bounded off the bed and went for the door. It was locked. Nobody could have entered without a key. And the hallway? Empty. I passed the rest of the night fully clothed, sitting up in bed and with the light on. Though I'd paid for 2 more nights, at 7:00 a.m., I gathered all my stuff and went down to the reception desk to check out. "By the way," I said to the 20-something receptionist, "my roommate never returned. I'm a little concerned." She picked up the room key, looked at it hard, frowned, and then glanced at her computer. "What room were you in again?" When I repeated it to her, she looked back at her screen. "Ma'am, that room's been empty for 3 weeks, and it's been cleaned since then. We only have 6 people in the whole building." The hostel has since been renovated, and it is now a luxury hotel. I realized that we didn't physically meet, but I thought it relevant since I seemed to have met someone. someone entered and left my room. Hi. Me, my sister, and my mom have been trying to make sense of this for the past couple of hours, and the facts get less comforting the more we compare our experiences of that night. So last Friday night, I, 17 male, was home alone while my family, besides my sister, 21, who was at work, stayed in their cabin a few kilometers away. I'm used to staying home alone, as this exact scenario is very common in the summertime, especially while I'm working and can't travel from the cabin and back. I'm not usually jumpy or afraid while home alone anymore, as I'm used to the odd creaks and settling noises of our old house. I was especially comforted by the fact that my sister's dog was also in the house with me that night, and most noises could be attributed to him, and if anything were to happen, he would act as a guard dog of sorts and alert me to anything odd. At the same time, however, he's the type of dog to bark at any noise or person walking past the door or windows, so I'm used to hearing him bark or growl at night. Even so, this past Friday, the sound of his barks at nearly 12 a.m. were disconcerting, to say the least. Despite my comfort with staying home alone, I am still terrified of the premise of a break-in or some other uninvited human interaction at midnight. I let him bark for a few seconds, telling myself it was just someone walking past our glass door in the adjacent alleyway, and he would just quiet down once they passed. Needless to say, that's not what happened. He kept barking and growling for a few moments too long, and I finally got out of bed, I sleep in the basement, and walked upstairs to check it out. As I suspected, he was standing alert at the glass door. I was comforted for a moment until I walked over, ready to close the curtains and go back to sleep, and saw the door open about 2 or 3 inches. I froze. I had let Bosco, the dog, out earlier that night, but I know I closed the door. I have never left this door open. I'm a paranoid person with bad anxiety, especially concerning break-ins and the like, so I would never, home alone, forget to close the door. I am 100% certain. But at the time, I didn't let myself think about these facts or even acknowledge that I could not have left the door open, because I knew it would send me into a spiral, possibly even an anxiety/panic attack if I didn't explain this away. I closed and locked the door, double-checking that it was certainly locked. Using the flashlight on my phone, the lights were all off, I looked around the entire second floor of my 3-floor house, including closets and other reasonable hiding spots, just to put my mind at ease, and upon finding nothing, went back downstairs to my room. As I was down there, trying to push away the fear, I could hear Bosco walking around on the floor that doubles as my bedroom's roof. I thought I was overthinking it when it started to sound like human footsteps, accompanied by Bosco's footsteps. He walks around for about 10 minutes before I put in my earphones and talk myself down until I can fall asleep. At 2 a.m. that same night, my sister comes home from work. I woke up a few minutes before this to Bosco in the basement, which he never does. There's even a gate to stop him from getting to the basement, whining at my bedroom door. When I got up to let him out, my sister walked in, and we let him out the front door rather than the glass patio door, letting him in the same way. We talked for a while before I went back downstairs and my sister went to the bathroom. I forgot about the door, busy with work, for the next few days, and forgot to mention it to anyone until tonight. My sister and mom were home with me for a movie night, while my dad and brother stayed at the cabin. I remembered the door situation when we were picking out horror movies to watch. I was sharing it as a creepy, almost funny story before my sister spoke up, saying that, the same night, an hour or so before they got home, the door was open again. The same door that was locked from the inside and not opened since earlier that night. My stomach dropped and I started shaking the second this was revealed. We started trying to explain it away. Maybe she had let Bosco out and forgot to close it, until we both recalled that we had used the front door. Then we were trying to justify a reason someone would break in to not steal anything and proceed to stay for 2 hours before leaving. Ultimately, I realized that I quite possibly locked someone in the house with me, then forced them to hide upstairs while I searched the second floor of our house. Then, this hypothetical person would be trapped up there, now knowing that this house, that appears empty with the rest of my family gone and all of the lights off, was not empty. and that there was a dog who would bark if they showed themselves again, alerting me to their presence. Then, when I was in the basement and my sister was in the bathroom, they ran out the glass door, which is timed perfectly to when they found the door open once more, much wider than when I found it, as though they were only in a hurry on the way out. Perhaps they left it open the first time for a quick escape, or to stop the loud sound of it meeting the door frame. Either way, it ties together too perfectly for me to reasonably brush it off. I know it's unlikely, especially with nothing missing, but in this small town, there have been many reports of break-ins with nothing missing, vandalizing, or just breaking and enterings many, many times, so it's not as unlucky as it might be in a bigger city. I can't make sense of this, and I'm shaken up thinking of the possibility of someone being in my house while I was asleep, alone in the basement. There's a part of me that doesn't believe it, but I can't shake the too many coincidences that all tie together to make this as concerning as it is. I certainly am glad that my searching came up empty that night, and I did not meet this person face to face.